Hello fellow painters and decorators of the interweb, DIYers, gardeners, window cleaners, anybody who's interested in painting and decorating and wants to know about spraying. I'm your man today. Right, quick video, and I would say quick video because you know what I'm like for videos. I'm going to try and explain how you set up an airless sprayer for spraying, and when I mean set up, more the connections. Dead easy, quick video, not going to be 53 minutes. I've got the GXff, nice little unit if you want to do a bit of spraying at home, or if you're a painter and decorator getting into spraying and want to use a sprayer. This kit, about £600-700 would get you spraying. It's got a hopper on it, you can see there, so you can use small amounts of paint. It's ideal. You've got in effect a whip hose. It's a 7.5 metre hose that connects to it, so you're not filling up the hose with a load of paint to spray before you've even got started. So yeah, it's a good bit of kit. We'll crack on. Anything you want to know, questions, smash the like button, the bell, all that, yeah, whatever. Right, one of the things I always tell you, if you've seen one of my other videos about tips on spraying, always have some petroleum jelly or Vaseline. Always use a little bit of Vaseline around the threads. So let's do it now. Bit of Vaseline on my finger. I just smear it on the inside so it goes in there, and then what I do, I connect the gun to it. Now this is the gun. It's a Tritech gun going on a Graco sprayer. I quite like the Tritech guns. It's a T360. Then I put, well, you can put any tip on you want as long as you've got the right guard, but obviously I'm using the Tritech guard with fine finish tips. I use the fine finish tip even on the ceilings, spraying emulsion. So right, I've connected that on. You just need a couple of spanners, pliers, whatever you've got, just to nip that up to get it tight. So as long as your threads are all nicely lined up and you're not cross threading it, just nip it up. You just see I'm just nipping it up so it's tight. Make sure you've got it all tight. That's all tight. Right, the other end of the hose, which is there, again I'm going to put a little bit of Vaseline on the end there, and if you can see there's a connection underneath the hopper. Connect that onto there. Right, once that's on finger tight, get your grips, knit that up. So we're actually connected up now. We've got a gun connected to a hose that's connected to the unit. Next thing you want to be aware of, just take off your guard, because I want to put some Vaseline on that. That's there. That goes on the end of the gun, like so. Now this doesn't need to be spanner tight. This can be just finger tight. So as long as you can move it with your fingers. Right, we've done that. Next thing, make sure you've got the right filter for the spray tips that you're spraying with. Now if you're doing woodwork, we've discussed this on another video, so if you want to scroll back you can do, but if you're using woodwork finish spray tips, a 210, 211 or 110, all around that sort of size. I've got a video on spray tips, I'll link that at the end. You've got to have the right filter. Now if you're using those smaller orifice size, and the lower the number, the smaller the orifice, make sure you use the correct filter. Now a filter on something like those tips will be a red. If you go a little bit larger you'll go on to a yellow, but I'm spraying emulsion. Now I'm going to use a 5/16 because my emulsion is going to be quite thin today. It's Tickerilla and it's an Optiva primer. Now you don't have to thin it, but I do just put a splash of water in it, and I find that a 5/16 spray tip is just nice. Now 5/16 spray tip, spraying emulsion, use a white filter. So let's open the gun up. Again, release the guard protector, unscrew it, and just check your filter. Yeah, my filters are white ones, so we're good on that. Put another little bit of smear of Vaseline around the threads, all the way around. Put the end of the gun on. Now these come off and on really nicely because I've got the Vaseline on it. It's not going to mix with the paint. Again, hand tight. Put the guard back on, put the trigger back, spring it in place. So we're gun connected on the unit sprayer. I'm just going to put a slight smear of Vaseline on the edges of my spray tip, and then that can go onto the spray gun there. Now when you're not spraying, and for safety, turn your tip vertical like that so it actually shuts it off. Don't forget, if you can see there, if the arrow shape of the spray tip facing forward, that means it's going to spray. If you turn it the other way, back on itself, that's going to flush it for any blockages. That's not a spray tip, that's just the reverse of the spray tip there. Does that make sense? That sounds a load of try, that does, but if you're spraying it that way, you see, if you're spraying it that way, if you want to clear a blockage, turn it all the other way around, clear the blockage. If you're not spraying, just for safety, lock it off like that. That won't let anything through. And also, if you're leaving your spray gun for any period of time, it's an idea just to shut it off like that, then it won't dry up. So let's turn it to the safety position, which is obviously not spraying. The trigger's still active, so I'm just going to put the guard lock on, so I can't spray now. So that is all set, it's all safe and it's set to go. All you've got to do now is get your paint, mix your paint correctly, add a bit of water if you need to. If you don't need any water, don't add any water to it, that depends on the paint you're using. Connect it up, and then there's a button underneath, particularly on this Graco GXff. There's a button that you press down before you turn it on, because what it does, the ball bearing that's your piston for the pump, blah 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 blah, it pushes it down, releases it, because it might be slightly set with a bit of paint and a bit of water around it. Press the button, then turn it on. Once you've got your paint in it, or if you're flushing it through with a bit of water, turn it to prime. Now there's a you can see that down here. Can you see that? There's a little valve. Now if it's down, that will allow you to spray. If it's in the upright position, that means it'll flush paint or water through the primer there. So let's see if I can just zoom in on that. I bet I can zoom in on that. Yeah, I bet I can. There. That's the prime hose. So that releases all the pressure that's building up and pumps the paint through back into the hopper. If you ever have a problem where you're finding that your gun's, let's come back, your gun's not spraying well, it might be the fact there's no pressure to your gun. So it's always a good idea to just prime your unit again, get the paint pumping back into the actual hopper, priming the unit. Once you can hear the sound, once the sound starts sounding like it's got pressure there, release that primer valve. That will then start pumping the paint to the gun. Does that make sense? Is that a simple way for me to explain how you set up an airless sprayer? Because virtually every airless sprayer is roughly about the same sort of setup. This has got a filter on inside of the actual unit, but I don't put a filter on that because I've never done from day one. I filter my paint because it's going through a hopper through the rock guard that's inside, which is there, that's inside the hopper. And then if it's fine finished paints that I'm using, I use a vegetable bag or a pair of tights and strain the paint through that. The other tip that I'm going to say to you is, when using your paint, just make sure you're using the right spray tip with the right pressure. Some people just go hell for leather, turn up the pump all the way up to the top, blasting paint everywhere, and before you know it, you've got a room full of cloudy, white, snowy dust. You don't want to do that. If you're regulating your paint with your pressure, getting the air mix right, getting your tip right, getting your thickness of your consistency of your paint right, you shouldn't have any of that overspray mist everywhere. So what I would say is, if you're finding it a little bit hard with the paint that you're using, think to yourself, have you got the right tip? Is your paint too thick? Is it too thin? Because if your paint's thinner, you can go to a smaller orifice size, and that's your numbers. Start knocking down. If we're spraying normal emulsion, let's talk about a 517. If you suddenly find that your paint's a little bit too thick, you might think, oh, 517's not good enough for me. Go up to a 519, or if you've got a 517, increase your orifice size slightly. Turning that on its head, if you thin your paint's thinner, or your temperature of your paint might be thinning it, because I've told you probably on a previous video before, if you've got paint on an underfloor heating, it can thin your paint, which is nice. If you suddenly find that your paint's thinner, you might want to go to a smaller spray tip. So still with a 5, instead of a 17, like I'm doing, because I've got my thinner paint, I'm going down to a 516. So don't forget, if your paint's thinner, you can go to a smaller orifice size. I've told you about women having babies and dilations and everything. Small, big, bigger, lets more through. So the bigger the number, if we're on a 517, that's a big number. 519, bigger. 520. Don't forget, you can also go wider, because that 5 number at the beginning is actually a width. It isn't 5 inch, it's 10 inch. So double whatever the number is at the front. As I say, I've touched on this on the previous video. But yeah, make sure that you've got your pressure right, because all of a sudden, if you've got thinner paint, it doesn't need so much power to push it through, so you can drop your pressure down. I don't want to tell you that there's a set pressure for anything. You might be spraying at 2000 one day, you might be spraying at 1500 on another. It's trial and error, so have a practice. I'm going to spray this ceiling. I'd like to think round about just under 2000 psi will be nicely for me with that mix of paint, if I've got the consistency right. If not, if you still getting tails, and that's the tails, it looks like you've got a fan pattern with little cat's fingers, tails at the end, just increase your pressure. Don't be frightened to increase your pressure, or if you think you want to thin it down a bit, you might want to thin your paint. So I'm not saying it's really a tip, it's just the basics of your spraying. If your paint's thin, you can go a smaller orifice size on your spray tip. If your paint's thicker, you might want to go a bit bigger. So just alter it that suits you, and then regulate your pressure. If you've got tails, what do? Increase your pressure. If you find that you've got a lot of bounce back because you've got too much pressure on your gun, just turn it down. Just see how you are. It is trial and error. Have a practice. So for now, I've told you how to quickly set up this. We're probably 10-12 minutes in, hopefully, when I've edited it, and that's helpful to you. If you want to know about, what's this? Clean shot. I can do that on another video. This is if you're using an extension bar like that, you put a clean shot on the end. Same principles, put some Vaseline on. We'll quickly touch on it now while we're here. Make sure you've got your washer in there. It connects to your gun, gives you an extension. This is what, 15 inch? 12 inch, 15, might be a bit bigger. Look at that. But I've not tightened it all up. I've got a clean shot on the end. Now you're going to say, Phil, what's a clean shot? Well, if you think about it, if you're spraying and shutting off the trigger there, there's still pressure in that pipe which can spit your paint, and that's where people complain about spitting. If you've got a clean shot on the end, about £110, clean shot on the end, tweak the valve there, you just turn it down, turn it open, tweak it to the consistency of your paint. So when you spray, do a test. If you don't get any spits, you've got it right. If you suddenly find you've got spits, just turn it and tighten it. So the more it goes in, the less chance of getting spits, but that all depends on your consistency of your paint. But that's what that's for, and I will be using one of those for the ceiling. It doesn't matter too much on a wash coat, but it's nice to have it because it also gives you a swivel head. Because once that's on there with a spray tip, you've got a swivel head. So are we clear? Are you going to be a pro sprayer by the time I've finished? Probably. What, like me? But there we are. That's a gun with an extension and a clean shot. If you want a bit more information on a clean shot, you can either Google it or just send me some questions, but they're brilliant. It's well worth having it, even if you just use it for the swivel head. When you come to clean it out, you unscrew that all the way out, and then that lets the full flow of the paint through it and obviously washing out. If you're getting spits, you tighten it down. So are we good on that? That's a quick 10-15 minutes. We might be on to 20 now. But no, thanks for listening. Any questions, just ask. They're all virtually the same sort of setup on an airless sprayer, whether you've got a Titan, a Graco, or even a Wagner. They're all very similar. So happy spraying. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.